Welcome to episode 44 of Redesigning Cities, the Speedwell Foundation Talks at Georgia Tech. I'm your host, Ellen Dunham-Jones, a professor in the School of Architecture, where I direct the MS in Urban Design. So, tonight, what is the relationship between AI and climate change? Most of us don't give much thought to making a few keyboard clicks to request information. Does that really have any impact on the heat, the fires, the storms, and floods impacting our cities? Anthony Townsend will argue that indeed it does, but that urban AI can also be used to empower our most vulnerable populations, enabling them to participate in the design of more locally supportive climate adaptation responses. After Anthony's talk, Debra Lam will lead him in a conversation taking us even deeper into the threats, but mostly opportunities, that AI poses for urbanists. Debra Lam, no stranger to the Redesigning Cities audience, is the founding director of the Partnership for Inclusive Innovation at Georgia Tech, pairing Georgia Tech researchers with communities in the Southeast to develop smart city solutions for shared economic prosperity. She combines public and private sector experience as Pittsburgh's inaugural Chief of Innovation and Performance and as a management consultant at global engineering and design firm Arup. She has received various awards, including being named one of the top 100 most influential people in digital government by Apolitical. Anthony has long been focused on the horizon, anticipating how emerging technologies will impact cities. His 2013 book, Smart Cities, and 2020 book, Ghost Road, Beyond the Driverless Car, both question the corporate vision of new technology and ask key questions about the kind of cities we as humans want to live in. He is currently Senior Research Associate at Cornell Tech's Urban Tech Hub, where, among other things, he leads an annual conference on AI and urban climate adaptation. Unfortunately, today's climate bit him back, and his flight was canceled. So Anthony will be joining us by Zoom. Sit back, everyone. I'm delighted to invite Anthony to share his screen while I stop sharing mine. Take it away, Anthony. I see your slides showing.
Oh, thanks, Ellen, for the invitation, and apologize to everybody. I was really looking forward to visiting the Georgia Tech campus. It's probably been 15, 16 years since I was there, and I'm always excited to see how campuses have changed since all the new faces there. But hopefully I'll get an opportunity to do so again in the future. Just to give you a bit of background on where I'm coming from and my perspective on AI and cities. I'm at Cornell Tech, which is a new campus of Cornell University. It's an engineering campus, graduate education only. And like our main campus in Ithaca in upstate New York, it's a land grant campus as well. Land was given by the city of New York to build the first engineering school in New York City in about 50 years. And so we've been at the AI game since the campus was established 10 years ago. And our mission right now is really to drive the AI era towards lasting economic and social prosperity for New York City and the world. And so even before the most recent boom in AI, we saw the opportunity here. And that's primarily what I'm going to focus on today is the opportunity specifically to use AI to deal with urban climate change. But we have to get the bad news out of the way, which is that AI is really bad for the climate, particularly this last wave of innovation that's been driven by generative AI. These are exceptionally computationally intensive applications. And while as recently as 3 or 4 years ago, all the big tech giants had decarbonization plans to get to zero net emissions, through the use of renewables, through the use of sophisticated power management schemes. Those have all been blown out the window by what's going on with AI. And so there's a real hand-wringing going on right now in the industry about how they are going to just accommodate the growth, uh, building enough data centers, enough power plants, securing the power to supply those data centers, and then perhaps returning to their decarbonization plans. Um, you know, this is really just a story of massive infrastructural change that's being driven by this technology. And there are really no easy answers right now. You can see this sort of playing out across the country. Many of the regions with lots of renewable power that had been data center locations before are being expanded, but we're also seeing new construction in areas that still depend pretty heavily on fossil fuels. So the problem gets worse when you think about the fact that even when tech companies try to use AI for climate good, it actually tends to backfire, especially when they're doing it in the messy, complicated, interconnected world of cities. Um, This is the video that was released by Google last year to announce a new project, an urban AI project aimed at reducing emissions from surface transportation from private vehicles. And as you can see, what they do is lay out this story that the problem in cities is that there's too much stop and go traffic, and stop and go traffic leads to inefficient operation of internal combustion engines and leads to excess emissions. And so their solution, obviously, is to use huge piles of data that they have from all the Android phones moving around in cities, their locations, and then optimize the traffic signals to eliminate, basically free the flow of traffic. And so, they're basically saying, like, we're going to get rid of red lights because red lights, cause a lot of stop and go, cause emissions. And in the process, they're completely throwing out 20 or 30 years of planning around complete streets. They ignore the fact that a lot of what intersections are meant to do now is to provide safe passage for pedestrians. And they're essentially resurrecting like a mid 20th century vision of optimizing traffic flow in cities and claiming that this is a climate win. And so I wrote about this in City Lab last year, really kind of calling out Google for not understanding cities and making a very crude attempt to apply existing methodology and their IT industry assumptions about what good looks like to complex urban systems. And so, their claim that motorists saw 30% fewer delays once this technology was implemented, overlooked the fact that they had omitted pedestrians and cyclists completely from the model, and that's the real path to reducing transportation emissions in cities. So this is a pretty, common mistake we see in the smart cities world when tech companies come in and try to assert, their version of good on cities. But I think it's really an attempt to try to uh, get some wins on the board, to score some points, because this climate, this carbon debt that is hanging over them as they scale up AI. So I think that the point to take away is that regardless of what happens with either the growth of AI and then related emissions, or the things that tech companies try to do to offset that, um, it's not clear what the net impact of AI will be on carbon emissions in cities. And so what I have done is shift my attention towards an area where I think the impact is much clearer. And that has to do with how AI can be used to help cities adapt to climate risks. And so we've been partnering with Urban AI, which is a Paris-based think tank that's focused on urban AI for the last 3 years, to do a series of what I call global dialogues in the fall, where we bring in people from academia, from industry, from government, from civil society, to help us understand how AI is being used to improve cities. And more over the last 3 years, those conversations have turned towards the topic of climate adaptation as the need has grown. And so this is a future that's already taking shape. And I think the urgency and the scale of the climate adaptation challenge in cities might even rewrite the future of AI and shape how the technology evolves. What I'm going to do is walk you through a horizon scan. This is a forecast of uh, three different types of information: signals, which are examples of the products and services that we see out in the world today, and we think may become more widespread in the future; trends, which sort of summarize the direction of change of clusters of signals; and then forecasts, which are the highest level pictures of what we might see in the future. And you can think of those forecasts as kind of like the headlines of an article in Wired magazine 10 years from now. They describe how the technology has impacted the world and what's driving it. You're welcome to browse this entire knowledge graph, which is there's about 150 pages in it at thefutureurbanai.org. And there are also ways to contribute as well if you find things out there in the world that you think are relevant. So the first forecast has to do with sensing, has to do with data that will drive urban climate adaptation and the AI we build to address it. And so this is really, I call this expansive views. And this is really a forecast about the future of sensing. And what it means is that the way that we measure risk and resilience in cities is going to undergo a profound transformation. And so for each of these forecasts, I'm just going to share a few examples of things that I see out in the world, these signals of change. What you're looking at now is a infrared, a thermal map of a plaza in the center of Graz in Austria. And this was taken by a drone. This is a image from a research project that did a very fine-grained, like 30 centimeter resolution map of extreme heat in a public space in a city that's experiencing pretty rapid warming. And what I love about this is that most of what we know about urban heat islands now is simulated. There aren't a lot of good direct measurements at the human scale. Most of the data is captured by satellites that just don't have the resolution to pick up these kinds of subtle differences and the relationship between the built form, the foliage, and temperature. And because they do this with a low-cost drone, this group was able to design some interventions, some mitigation steps for the heat, and then fly the drone again the following summer to measure the impact of those changes. So this is a phenomenally powerful tool that I think shows what's possible. Drones and other types of sensors, in this case, LiDAR sensors, so laser scanning, will also allow us to quantify uh, other kinds of nature-based systems in cities that are important for climate adaptation, in this case, trees. And so on the left, you see a scan of the trees, and on the right, an algorithm that has actually segmented that data, that point cloud, and identified what parts of that data set apply to each individual tree, allowing the creation of a digital twin that can be used to measure and model the benefits of each individual tree in 3D over time. And this is just a phenomenal step change over the kinds of metrics that we use for urban canopy now, which is basically just total land coverage. And so rather than taking care of the forest as a whole, we can really think about the ideal location for trees to maximize their benefits. And then we get into, so those are sort of things that are like familiar, I think, for urbanists. Then we get into the weird stuff that computer scientists are doing. So Signing Z, who's a researcher at NYU's Courant Institute for Computer Science, has been building multimodal agents that he deploys into Google Earth. So their environments are our real cities. So he's basically placing these agents into these models of our cities to do real work. And so one example, he sent a bunch of these multimodal AI agents into Central Park, traversing through the Google Earth representation of Central Park to do real work. In this case, to count up all the benches, all the fire hydrants, and all the trash bins. And you just think about how this could be used to map resilience assets, whether it's green infrastructure or detecting flooding in street view imagery. Um, this is just a remarkable capability to harness AI to explore these captures of our own cities. For each of these forecasts, I raised what I think was a sort of combination question mark and exclamation point. And these are really the concerns that we should have. What are the big questions that these developments might raise? And for expansive views, it's really about shifting power. As we develop bigger and better sources of data about the climate challenges that cities face, who's going to have the access and ability to use it, whether it's to engineer better defenses or to plan retreats to save ground. The second forecast is what I call optimized insights. And this really has to do with making sense of all of that sense data. What this means, I think, is that thinking machines are going to become part of the teams that are planning and running future cities alongside human decision makers. And the role that they're going to play is to make sense of evidence informing predictions that are just going to be impossible for us to ignore. That said, I do realize that we're operating in a country where more and more it is sort of the norm to ignore evidence. But I think cities are not going to have that luxury because they're going to be facing these challenges right outside their front door. So some examples of what that looks like on the ground. One of the really exciting things as a former GIS person who has I always tell people one of the most useful languages I ever learned was structured query language, SQL. This is sort of lingua franca for the last 60 years of how you interact with structured data. Um, LLMs are really, I think, pushing that into the past. So GeoForge is one of many um, GIS tools that basically let you interact with data using natural language queries, complex layered geospatial data. And so in this example, the authors of this package are showing how, within 30 seconds and a handful of simple natural language prompts, you can develop a flood risk map of a large city using open data. And so this is just a remarkable democratization of the kind of analytical capability, the sense-making capability that right now requires, lots of infrastructure and highly trained planners. For the general public, we're seeing some really exciting jumps forward in using generative AI, in this case, image generation capabilities, to help people understand in very tangible, intuitive ways what the impacts of climate hazards could be. So in this case, this is a street in Queens, in New York City, as visualized through Beta NYC's Flood Gen tool. And what the Beta NYC team did, this is a nonprofit organization, civic tech organization in New York City. They identified a number of environmental justice neighborhoods in the city that were at risk of severe coastal flooding, and then used generative AI to render these simulated images of street flooding. And you can use the slider in any of these locations on the map to go back and forth. You can dial in different levels of flooding severity. And this has become a really powerful tool for advocates of resilience planning and climate mitigation in their communities at the local level to get people's attention and to get the attention of elected officials to take more drastic actions to prepare the city for the changes to come. And I think this is first of many of these kinds of efforts. For the professional planners, there are also tools coming that I think are going to raise the bar as well. This is Climate IQ, which is an effort at the Urban Systems Lab at New School University in New York City to develop a comprehensive physics-based hazard dashboard for cities all around the world. And the idea here is to really standardize the interface and standardize the modeling and standardize the data collection that goes into these kinds of tools rather than a very patchwork approach that's out there now where rich cities in rich countries can afford to have consultants and engineering companies, build their custom dashboards, while cities in the global south have nothing. This is really meant to kind of level the playing field. And then this is kind of uh, a crazy trend as well. Um, this what you're looking at here is a screenshot from a household location choice modeling tool out of a startup in Berkeley, California. And basically, this is a tool that's used to model like land use transportation interactions. Well, why do people choose to live where they live based on their travel needs to work and shopping? This is, kind of an age-old type of analysis in transportation planning. But what's remarkable about this tool is that these guys have been using large language models to read the latest research literature on household location choice. So all the latest findings, and then incorporate. So they read that stuff in English, or they can actually read in different languages. They understand what are the newest research findings on this topic. And then the LLM can use that to update the code of the model to incorporate that new understanding of human behavior. Um, so you can imagine as we move into a world where the impacts of climate risk on where people choose to live grow, and our understanding of that through research grows, and closing the loop by using these tools to automatically pull those new findings in and update the models is going to really allow us to quickly accelerate our understanding of what's happening and our capacity to respond. So, the question mark exclamation point for optimized insights for the sense making piece of this AI adaptation future is that I think these insights will challenge local knowledge. We know that a lot of what happens, rightly so, in the world of urban resilience is about really engaging people where they are, understanding the assets that are on the ground, and that this is not a challenge we're going to solve with centralized planning and engineering. But AI may kind of reinvigorate that kind of dynamic. And I think the challenge is ensuring that these AI-powered adaptations are accountable and aligned with what communities really need and what they're saying that they need. So the third forecast is what I call amplified actions. And so this is the sort of completion of, and this is really, these forecasts are really organized around the things that computers do. They sense, they gather inputs, they transform them, they make sense of them, and then they produce outputs. And in this case, the outputs are increasingly connected to the physical world. And so what I think this means is, that the kind of triple threat that we face right now, that urban populations pretty much everywhere in the world are aging. They're spreading out, and they're starting to feel the heat. They are experiencing the onset of rapid warming and other impacts of climate change. That heavy automation, and automation has always been a key to growing cities, whether it's the introduction of the telegraph or elevators, or even traffic signals. Automation has always been a tool for managing urban growth, and I think that will continue to be the case. So these are some of the most exciting, I think, examples in the presentation, because they really start to speak to how we're going to use these tools to craft better resilience. This is some screenshots from Urbanist AI. Urbanist AI is a Helsinki-based design collective that has been using generative AI to develop new kinds of engaged planning processes with communities around the world, where they basically use these image generation tools to help participants and charrettes prototype and visualize the kinds of public realm that they want to see in their city, rather than dictating it to a professional who goes off and designs something and then brings back a rendering. And so this is, I think, really empowering people to turn their ideas into images that can drive deliberation and consensus building around those futures. Another really key part that our center has been getting involved in quite actively with the chief climate officer, Rit Agrawala in New York City, is what I call the administration of adaptation. Um, and this has to do with the fact that as Commissioner Agrawala puts it, he has 30 years of construction to do to prepare New York City for climate change, and he's got 10 years to do it. And one of the things that is really ironically slowing down the administration of adaptation and that construction is environmental impact assessment. Um, and as it turns out, there are many parts of the environmental impact assessment process in New York, as well as other places, that are just really out of date. They create a lot of paperwork, they slow down the permitting process, and they don't actually produce the outcomes that they were originally intended to. And so, one of our urban tech fellows last year convened a workshop with all of the industry providers of traffic data and the teams at New York City Department of Transportation that administer the traffic impact analysis component, which is one of, I think, 13 or 14 chapters of a comprehensive environmental review in New York City. And the goal is to replace the old statutory methods of doing this traffic impact study, which I mean involves like people with clipboards in the street with data-driven automated processes. So in an ideal world, you could simply submit your digital plans into some kind of validation tool, and it would instantly be able to check it off, as opposed to having months and months of delay and great expense. That's one of 13 or 14 chapters of an environmental impact assessment. But I think you get the idea that moving towards an all digital system that uses AI to provide the scrutiny that we want from an environmental impact assessment, but to deliver it in a timely fashion in order to allow these essential public works to move forward is really an important breakthrough. I think AI is also going to be used to not invite, but to invent new kinds of infrastructure, like the blue roofs of Amsterdam. This is a new project that is coming online that is essentially a combination of a green roof uh, with plantings, to absorb rainfall, and a very sophisticated, algorithmically driven water retention system that can hold and discharge massive, massive amounts of stormwater from these rooftops into the stormwater system. And so, in addition to the plantings, which I think is the face of resilience, this is a nature-based solution. But there's a surprising amount of technology in that nature-based solution. There's one algorithm that's looking up at the sky, anticipating when the rain is going to come and how much of it there's going to be. And then there's another one looking down through the stormwater drain system, trying to make sure that it doesn't discharge when the water treatment facilities are already at maximum capacity. So it's really a way of using AI to kind of even out the and reduce the peaks in the system that make sure that stormwater gets to where it needs to be and is processed properly. This is just a completely new kind of infrastructure, almost a utility for managing storm discharge. The further we look out in the future, things start to get even weirder. Singapore's H3 Dynamics, they're using drones to do what I think of as kind of the dangerous and dirty work of inspecting building facades, which, as weather becomes more severe, is going to become like making sure that we can maintain a good state of repair in high-rise buildings, which will be part of the solution for reducing emissions through higher urban density, is absolutely going to be essential. And so these drones, they basically sell a self-contained box. There are versions of it that don't even connect to the building's energy system. They have their own solar panels. And every day the box opens up, drones come out, they sort of hatch out of the box, and they take a picture of the entire facade and are able to detect, all different kinds of defects, monitor them over time, and then even automatically dispatch work crews to go and fix those so that the building, stays in a good state of repair. And this is just a remarkable degree of improvement over the kinds of scheduled inspections or other ways of dealing with these problems. So, the question mark exclamation point for amplified actions is that I think this is, really fundamentally about robotic extensions of existing urban infrastructure. And while this really creates extraordinary capabilities, again, as the population ages and it becomes harder and more expensive to source the labor we need to maintain and stormproof cities, um, we're going to have to figure out how to govern these things. What are the fail safes that we need to put on these heavily urban, automated urban systems? So, I think part of why this is so intriguing to me is that, you know, as I have followed the conversations about urban resilience over the last decade, which have become more urgent, more intense, there's a very strong kind of undercurrent in those conversations that technology is the problem. Technology is what got us here, and that embracing nature and nature-based solutions, embracing the power of communities at a local level to strengthen themselves. Those are those are sort of the like main themes, and I think it overlooks the power that technology can offer to both of those approaches, as well as some of these others. And so to me, really understanding the constructive role that AI can play in urban climate adaptation is the key. And so, the way I've tried to defang the technology piece of this is to focus in on intelligence. That this is about artificial intelligence, natural intelligence, and human intelligence working together in a mutually supporting way to give us the know-how and the ingenuity that we need in order to do this on the short timetable that we have. So I want to just wrap up by sharing a couple thoughts about what I think this means for urban design. And broadly, I think the challenge of making AI and the mechanisms of AI visible in the urban realm, it's already, the technology itself is in many ways a black box. And even in the screen world, it's hard to see what's inside that box, what's at work. And in many cases, the people who are making these tools don't really fully have a clear deterministic understanding of how they work. There is a lot of prior art. This work actually grew out of the Sidewalk Toronto project, which was Google's smart city effort in Canada that didn't move forward. It's called originally was called digital. Sorry, digital transparency for the public realm (DTPR), and they've renamed it so it's digital. Routines and places or something like that. And really this is a visual language for explaining like what data is being collected in the public realm and what it's being used for. They are now in the earliest stages of wrestling with how do we represent the kind of sense. So this was the sensing piece. They're really trying to wrestle with how do we visualize the sense making piece? How can we explain to people in a visual way when they're in the city, what AI is at work on them and around them, and what are the benefits that it's providing? That's really the key piece that they want to explain. So I think this is early days, but this is one of the most important, I think, precursors to getting this right, and essentially getting permission from the public to adopt these technologies. I think we can use AI to make the urban designs that we want work better as well. What you're looking at here is this is an e-bike battery swap station from Taiwan, and this is essentially the hub of a new kind of land use pattern that in my book Ghost Road I described as micro sprawl. Really, I think of it as sprawl around fixed transit hubs and transit-oriented development. It's not driven by automobiles private cars, but by small electric vehicles, e-bikes, which allow you to extend that walk shed around a fixed transit stop up to like 5 times and 25 times the land area that you can upzone and deliver higher density housing. And so a piece of infrastructure like this is really essential to allowing large fleets of e-bikes, both for personal use and for commercial use. These are mostly meant for delivery drivers to support that really compact, high density, transit connected kind of neighborhood. And they can also be used as backup batteries in the event of a power outage. So, in many ways, this is a land use, transportation, energy systems resilience hub. And it's something that I think we can really start to think of as kind of connective tissue for future neighborhoods. And, you know, I wrote Ghost Road. I started writing it in 2018. It was published in 2020. It's 2025 now, and I feel like, the technology is finally starting to deliver on the promises that were made, as much as 15 years ago. Automated vehicles are starting to spread, and they're about to get good really, really quickly because the same advances that have been driving AI in the consumer world, in the online world, through LLMs and other tools, are starting to be used to train automated vehicles. And so this is an image from a paper that some researchers at Apple published, where they're basically allowing a self-driving algorithm to play a game at scale millions and millions of times in a simulated road environment to learn very quickly things that Waymo and Tesla took a decade to teach their self-driving vehicles. And so this is, to me, an example of a really rapidly accelerating pace of innovation there. And automated vehicles are really just a very specialized kind of robot. And it raises the question of whether this was really the fundamental question of Ghost Road. Like, how do we think about where we situate robots in the future city? Is it set up like this one, which is this is the inside of an Amazon automated warehouse where you see the human beings are essentially confined to cages on the periphery of the city because they're inefficient. They require margins of safety. They are, they don't have sensors on them to avoid collisions, and so they have to be kind of encapsulated at the margins of the system. When I wrote the book, this is where I thought things were heading. But the more I see of how quickly these technologies are moving forward, the more I start to, wonder if we need to be thinking about, much more integrated types of designs where the robots are smarter and are more capable of mixing with people. All of this, I think, like starting to map this onto the spatial structure of the city. I fall back on conventional tools. So the new urbanist transect for me was one way of thinking about, okay, let's go zone by zone and think about what some of the implications of these technologies could be. And let's map out the transect of the AI city, the automated city, and think about where we might and how we might structure those new configurations of technology and place in order to support the goals that we have for sustainable resilient cities. So I want to close just by sort of looping back around to where I started, and raising the possibility that urban climate adaptation is really like an existential problem, the existential problem that humanity faces going forward. And if we sort of give it that kind of respect, it can and should shape the future development of AI itself, rather than the other way around. And when I think about that, I keep thinking about this image. This is the neural network of a fruit fly brain, the first map of neural network of a fruit fly brain, which was published by some researchers at Berkeley late last year. And unlike our large language models right now, the things that are being deployed that are driving that massive consumption in energy that are built to be able to do anything, to be super intelligent, to answer any question, solve any problem, This is which are very large. They have like 70 billion neurons. This is a very, very simple machine. This is a very, very simple form of urban AI, and it's incredibly efficient, energy efficient. It's very practical. It can do remarkable things. And I think that's the kind of leaner, meaner, greater, and more pervasive urban AI that we're going to need to do the work of climate adaptation. We don't need super intelligence. What we need are tiny little robots that can crawl into those cracks on the sides of high-rise housing and seal them up and protect them from the storm that's on the way. And I think this is where we can start to see the problems of cities starting to push back against where the industry is headed. So I'm going to stop there. I'm looking forward to the discussion, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Anthony. Oh, that was terrific. Cheers. And I'm going to stop sharing my slides as well and invite Debra Lam to come up to the podium. And all right, welcome, Debra.
Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. So great to see everyone tonight. Thank you, Anthony, for a really thoughtful and provocative talk on obviously how AI has not only evolved very quickly, but where its role is both in terms of its energy and I would say resource intensity in shaping the built environment, but also honestly a range of use cases that could be applied in terms of climate adaptation. So I have a few questions that I will kick off in this conversation, and then I know Ellen will open it up for additional questions. Just know that if you have questions online, use the Slido and you type the questions on, and then we will answer them. But in the audience, obviously, if you have questions, we'll take the mic to you and answer them through that way. So a range of different ways to ask the question. But and the first talk, Anthony, obviously, you brought a lot of use cases that were led either by the local government, whether it's New York City or different startups or obviously different research projects. So can you talk to us a little bit about the role of, each of these different sectors and partnerships? So we talk a lot here about public-private partnerships, and what do you think the role the private sector needs to do, the public sector needs to do, or even universities need to do to be in this frontier space, to be more thoughtful, as you said, and to really be ahead of the AI revolution, if you will?
Yeah, so I think that the the one sector that's kind of missing from this right now. So over the last 2 or 3 years, basically since ChatGPT, we've seen just a huge like FOMO, right? Take shape in every one of those sectors, in all levels of government, in industries, that aren't the ones creating this, universities. So New York State, we have an initiative called Empire AI that's basically building a data center for higher ed to make sure that our scientists have access to the compute power because industry is basically hoarding it all. And it's civil society that really does not have, I think, like a coherent, like even network of folks talking about what the opportunity is here, and certainly not in like the kind of grassroots network of organizations that have been focused on resilience for the last 10 or 15 years. And so I think that's the piece that I'm most concerned about and where I'm focusing most of my effort. And the way we've been trying to push that forward is through a partnership between Cornell Tech, Northeastern University, and New America Foundation called Rethink AI. And what Rethink is doing is really trying to demonstrate like what the potential and the right process for designing AI-based systems that work at the interface of city government and civil society. And almost all of the early pilots that we're doing have to do with resilience. So one of them is working with the participatory budgeting NGO in New York City to try to understand how they can use chatbots to really understand the way that community-based organizations are identifying and how they're describing resilience challenges in their applications for funding. So this is something that's drawing on like 10 years of past application data, tons of city open data, to really understand, what is it that these organizations are saying when they're bringing these problems forward for funding. And I think that the thesis is that by doing that, the city and the organizations can understand each other better, and that they can sort of try to bubble up some of that sensing and that priority setting that's happening at the local level up into the city's formal resilience planning efforts.
Yeah, I know you and I are both part of Rethink AI, and I think there's been some really good, thoughtful projects around civic AI and how it can be used as a model for other communities, especially when it comes to community participation and whatnot. So when I look at your examples, I think of both the inputs and outputs of what's required. Obviously, we again know AI requires a lot of resources, even if you think about the DeepSeek efficiencies that have been built. But AI has helped us, better collect data, especially the visualizations that we haven't been able to see and understand before, invite more people to engage, and make more efficient processes. So to that extent, it's similar to other tech revolutions in the past, in terms of that kind of advancement. So for those that are skeptical, how is this AI tech revolution different than past, especially when it comes to some of the lessons learned, as you noted, but also what you're kind of trying to anticipate, which is some of the unintended consequences for this next stage of growth.
Yeah, I mean, I think what's different in a good sense is, the last 20, 25 years, tech has been shifting more and more towards consumers. And, the last wave of Gen AI has like really embodied that in every way. I mean, this is about massively lowering the barriers to like really sophisticated computational capabilities. And that I think if there's one theme behind everything that I showed, it's like this stuff makes it really easy to do amazing work. And that's frankly what has like everyone scared about the labor market impacts. Um, it's pretty clear that this is going to eliminate a lot of kind of like knowledge work or information processing work. It's not clear what new kinds of work it's going to create in the economy. I think particularly when we look at like the most vulnerable communities, like I think there's a lowering of access to certain kinds of sense making that is really profound. I think the flip side of that is that brings people to these tools who may not have, the knowledge or skills to like ask, okay, how is it getting that answer, right? And that the results of AI processes are not scrutinized to the degree that they need to be. Um, that's the big risk, the pervasive risk that I think you know AI governance was meant to address. And unfortunately, we're taking kind of a pretty big step backwards right now. It's unclear like what the new federal directive is going to be on AI, but it's not likely to be stronger governance. Um, I think there are some promising developments with the latest round of AI models, which employ a technique called chain of thought, where the AI sort of, rather than spitting out, its first response to a query, will actually take some time to break down the query and reason through it, and in many cases show you that reasoning process. And I think that's potentially a big piece of instilling public trust in AI that will allow more people, more vulnerable people, to use the tools with confidence.
Okay, so you mentioned that governance-wise, we're taking a step backwards. So I'm gonna double tap that a little bit, given the state of the world, and hone in. So, especially in the climate space, we've been around. So when the federal policies, weren't as prominent as before, we saw the rise of local governments taking a step up, and thousands of cities adopting climate change action plans and setting up their own carbon reductions targets, et cetera. We now find ourselves in a similar space in AI, where, as you noted, the federal policies are not as prominent, and are seen to be more optimistic and laissez-faire in general. Do you see something similar happening with local governments when it comes to AI policies and AI thinking? And then how so? What should these local governments be doing in this space, given what is, the extent of international or national recognition and work?
Yeah. No, I mean, there has been a lot of activity at the local level around anticipating AI that goes back, 4 or 5 years at least, prior to the release of ChatGPT and the kind of Gen AI revolution. Um, New York City, Amsterdam, Helsinki, there was a kind of network of cities that had been pretty active over the last 10, 20 years around open data, really trying to put in place internal capacities and processes for assessing technology and managing technology and regulating it. These are cities that were really heavily and severely impacted by, the app economy, which emerged post 2008, release of the iPhone. Uber, Airbnb, like urban services that really challenge the old regulatory systems. And so they in the meantime have gotten really good at anticipating technological change. And some of those cities now have formal algorithm registries where they internally audit and document all of the automated decision-making systems that they own and use. Um, and around them is a much larger network of cities, multiple different overlapping networks of cities that through existing organizations and new organizations that are trying to crowdsource approaches to dealing with AI, whether it's figuring out what the use cases are that will be beneficial that they want to support going forward, and what university researchers have to offer, or just figuring out like how do we deal with vendors? What should we be asking vendors when they try to sell us an AI solution, and how do we document the responses that they give us in a way that allows us to compare apples and oranges? Really, really basic boilerplate stuff, but if I look back 10 or 15 years at how cities responded individually and as a group to the technologies that were disrupting them then, it's like night and day now. I think they're very well organized, and they're developing best practices and solutions and sharing them with each other in like overnight in ways that are really kind of remarkable and really effective. And I think, when I've talked to people in industry, they're kind of like a little stunned because they didn't expect that from local governments. So I think it's a good sign. I'm cautiously optimistic.
Cautiously optimistic. That sounds enough that is possible, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So you mentioned obviously communities and empowerment and people several times during your presentation. So let's hone in on the people aspect of this and the human intelligence that's required to support and frankly guide and protect the artificial intelligence that's required in this space. So on the flip side, as I think one of the slides that was most profound to me when you talked was the community or the climate tool, analysis tool, in which the tool itself can improve by just reading the research literature and then recoding the models, which I think is far in advance. Most people wouldn't be able to not understand some of this literature and then be able to correct and understand how to correct. Right. So as AI is able to do this level of work, and as you show a video of robots, moving, supply chain and logistics and warehouses without people, what is the role of human intelligence, and what kind of skill sets are required? What kind of education is required, ongoing training, especially as we're thinking, as we are in a university, as there are many students here in the room, what do they need to do to prepare to govern AI and to help facilitate AI for good, if you will, in this next stage?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. Like, I think we're probably going to be need new kinds of graduate level education. You see sort of, and that's part of what we're trying to do at Cornell Tech, although we're sort of, our urban tech degrees like over indexed on the information systems side. So our students are mostly getting master's degrees in applied machine learning with a little dose of urbanism. There are other programs like Brian Boyer's program at the University of Michigan is more of a kind of urban planning, urban studies undergraduate degree with a helping of design and a helping of computer science in it. And I think, a diversity of approaches will be required. Um, and I think, in many ways, like the arc of how GIS and other, when I was at MIT in the late 90s, were called planning support systems, deliberately kind of demoted to signal to the rest of the field that this is not about changing what you do or why you do it. This is about making you better at doing what you think is right because of all of the research and experience, that urban planning theory has developed over 50, 70, 100 years. And so I think that's a really, really key piece of it, is that we understand that these, at the end of the day, are decision support systems, that they are not going to take leadership or absolve people of making hard decisions, but they can relieve them of the burden of making many of the routine decisions, and also provide capabilities that are superior to human capabilities in many ways. In the same way that we're seeing these tools be applied in medical diagnostics or industrial control systems or all these other fields, we can benefit from that too. There is a lot of dull, dirty, dangerous work that goes on in building and running cities. And with the clock ticking and the stakes growing, like I think you know pushing those tools away because of a lack of understanding of how they work is riskier than taking a calculated risk and adopting them.
Thank you. Ellen's next to me, so it means that it's time for some audience Q&A. So I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you, Debra. Don't go away. You can jump in on the answers to these questions as well. And I'm actually going to start with a question of my own, which for Anthony, I absolutely love the image of AI being used to increase the diversity of types of places. I loved seeing the transect up there. I am a new urbanist. The amplifying community voices, and then the highly local resilience planning. But there just seems this looping. I asked all my students to submit questions, and I think all of them were in one way or another still asking, what about the corporation? Aren't the corporations still just going to kind of take over? If there's a really great new tool that's being used, it will be bought out and kind of become corporate. And maybe that's just the nature of things, and then just new tools develop as well. Maybe this gets back to your point about education, people needing to be cross-trained and being able, that designers, yes, still, I mean, right now, I look in the studios and I see a lot of the architecture and planning students using generative AI, but you focused really on the diagnostic kind of AI tools. So anyway, that's a long answer, long question, not very clear. Just talk about it.
Well, so I'll go through it backwards. So, I mean, I did show a lot of generative AI, but I also showed a lot of just conventional, like even very simple machine learning. And I think that makes the story more powerful because we know that stuff better. The the costs of doing that are much lower. It's much less compute intensive. We can make those kinds of mechanisms interpretable so you can crack them open and understand like actually how the decision was reached. And they're much less energy intensive. So um, non-Gen AI approaches are much more amenable to kind of rapid implementation with less risk. And so anytime like that path is there, to me, it's almost like you're foolhardy to not take it. The Gen AI stuff has like very different capabilities, but um, I think it's still a little bit of kryptonite going on there. Um, what was the first point was about? Oh, corporate control. Okay, so um, part of what fascinates and repulses me about this space right now is that climate adaptation is very quickly turning into the next big thing on Wall Street. So we have in New York City like two or three big uh, conferences now around, essentially investment opportunities in adaptation technology, and they almost all are focused on like risk scoring and risk analytics. So it's primarily about the future of insurance. What is the technology that is going to allow future insurers to, reduce their exposure and maximize their revenues? Um, and behind them is like incredibly precise weather prediction software. But there's also like lots of interesting new products that are being developed, like parametric insurance. So parametric insurance is like it's almost like sports betting for weather. Like you don't get paid out based on how much damage you incurred. You just get paid out based on events. So you buy a policy, if there's this much wind or this much water or it gets this hot for this long, I get a payout. Um, and what intrigues me about it is like, wow, that's great. Like those products will allow more people to reduce their risk um, and potentially have, like a backstop if they're wiped out. On the other hand, it's like this is kind of fracking like climate vulnerability for profit. Uh, and so I think yes, there are a lot of investors who are eyeing up this space. But I also think that they're going to be the ones that bring the capital and the talent that are going to be able to provide like innovations that we're all going to benefit from. So, it's something that I think is bigger than urban planning. It's more of like a sort of tech innovation policy and financial regulation, but the numbers are sort of lining up that de-risking, America is going to be one of the big industries of the 21st century. And these technologies are going to be a really, really essential piece of it.
All right. Well, thanks. Debra, pick a question.
Do you see AI tech companies actually following through on their goals to increase renewable energy production to offset their data centers' energy use?
The last time I checked, they were all moving kind of at light speed away from their zero carbon commitments because they're just no longer, at least the straight line forecast is that they'll never reach them if AI grows the way it can. The corollary of that is that I still think they're pursuing the renewable stuff, and it's not just about reducing emissions; it's also a sort of continuity of business case for them. Amazon announced a huge project in Southern California that's It's essentially a solar farm sitting on top of a data center, sitting on top of a giant battery. And for them, you know, that is definitely some carbon offsets, some renewable energy into their data center system. But it's also a data center that will never ever go offline until the sun stops shining. And so, they have a pretty complicated set of constraints that they have to work around, and the energy and emissions is just one part of it. We actually hired a new faculty member at Cornell Tech last year. He designed Meta's one of Meta's schemes that they use to reduce emissions, which is basically to move the workload around the world throughout the day to data centers that are currently being supplied by renewable energy. And so it reduces the need for on-site storage, because they can just move the work to whatever data center has wind or sun. Um, and it's it's a pretty sophisticated approach, but it's not that sophisticated. And it's the kind of thing that I think we'll see, sort of spread more and more. This kind of moving of workloads to where the green energy is. And I think that's the kind of thing that could really change this forecast very quickly. Industry has to solve this problem. It's a huge liability for them, and I think there will be some creative solutions to it that may offer us some off ramps to that kind of doomsday scenario.
Just a couple more notes on the data center, especially since Anthony's showing you the map of Georgia and the rise of data centers. So a couple things here at Georgia Tech, we actually have some research on actually how to make a data center more efficient. And some led by Strategic Energy Institute and others. So there's some really good research on thinking on the other side of this in terms of what could be done on the data center, both in terms of intensity, but also in terms of it as a community anchor, if you will.
Well, and including waste heat capture, because they generate just enormous amounts of heat. So the Coda building is actually recycling a lot of that heat. I know some in Germany, the local swimming pools are being heated by data center waste heat, and yet we're building most of them in really pretty rural areas where nothing around them at all. So, but
About 10 years ago, Microsoft research, some folks there published a paper that was imagining, what if home water heaters could be mini data centers, distributed data centers, and we could basically use the waste heat from those distributed data centers to heat domestic hot water. And it was sort of a thought experiment, but it did show that, this stuff is being built so quickly that it can actually become a driver of the energy transformation rather than just a kind of passenger.
they could.
We didn't really talk about jobs too much, but as you probably know, Microsoft here has a data center academy to really think about what kind of jobs now and in the future are required to support the data center. And again, it's not just about energy, it's also about water, which has been a huge issue here locally as well.
Yeah. All right. We're getting near the end. So last question, and it's, I think, one I know a lot of people will want to hear. Looking into the future, how do you envision AI transforming the way cities are designed, and what role should city planners and urban designers continue to play? I mean, how do you really see, do you have a vision of the city? You showed us sort of some graphics, but tell us what you see on the horizon.
Yeah, I mean, I think just looking at the examples that I showed you, many of those are tools that I think, urban designers, urban planners will be using in the next 4 or 5 years. So, digital twins of the urban canopy, drones and high resolution urban heat island mapping. That will be part of what you do, in addition to like walking the plaza and pulling some satellite data before you start doing a heat mitigation plan. Those generative design tools, those will be the things that you'll build your public engagement work and your design charrettes around. rather than tabletop exercises, or in addition to tabletop types of stuff. And I think what people will find is that there'll be a learning curve there, but in many ways, people will find them easier to use. I certainly find a picture of what I'm looking at from a first person point of view easier to understand than a site plan, which I didn't learn how to read until I was in graduate school. So I think thinking of it not as like a wholesale transformation of what planners and designers do, but as tools that can be pulled in to existing processes, to augment them, and then slowly thinking about how those processes can change over time. I think there's
Your
lots of food for
answer,
thought there.
I'm interrupting, Anthony, only because we really are running out of time. But and we do have one audience member who really wants to ask one more question. But you are giving us a description of how we will design, but you're not telling us what it will look like. So do you see AI
What cities will look
changing
like?
what cities look like? What different that we will be more diverse because AI will actually allow us to be more local, or will we be more homogenous? I don't know. I'll leave it at that. That's one of those just a
I
more
can't.
philosophical.
Yeah, I can't answer that.
All right. I'm going to invite this audience member to ask the last.
Hey there, and my question
Hi.
kind of relates, funnily enough, with the previous, but I think it's interesting. Kind of a rallying cry the past 10 or so years has been kind of to design cities for people, not cars. I'm kind of wondering if in the next 50 years the rallying cry could be design society for people, not AI. Do you know have there been kind of conversations around how to really use because I think tools they're kind of objective. They can be used for a lot of different things, but are there conversations being had, and how are those conversations going as far as from the kind of philosophy for how to use these tools? And yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the pace of technological innovation has been so fast that the ethicists, the policy thinkers, like who are addressing those kinds of questions, are really just racing to keep up. There's I think it's really too early to say, and I think there are many people who share those concerns that this is the tool that's going to be captured by powerful people to reorganize the world before the rest of us figure out what's going on. And that's not a bad starting point. But what I'm trying to do is show that it's also a tool that can be harnessed by folks who are interested in the collective good. And that's really what I want to inspire you to do, is to explore that opportunity and look for those use cases, those opportunities, those needs, and where there's alignment with what emerging AI capabilities are, to push for that.
All right. I am closing with my last question, and it's one that I ask all of the speakers here, and I'm going to ask both of you. Georgia Tech is a top research university full of students who have to do research papers and experiments and projects of some kind. I would like to ask each of you to identify a research question or project that you really hope the next generation tackles, so that we'll all be better equipped to redesign our cities and use it, whether it's using these tools, whether it's about using AI tools, or if it's just any research question that you feel the next generation still really has to tackle.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, if I was starting a new PhD, it would be around one of those three exclamation question marks that I shared. And the one that I think about, it's probably 20 years too early to really work on it. But how we're going to govern automated infrastructure, and what the fail safes are there, and what the new vulnerabilities are. we don't want to be creating more brittleness in cities as we build out AI-powered infrastructure for resilience. And I think, if we learn anything from technology, like just setting up a connected classroom for a lecture, it's such a challenge to get all these built environment, technology components, people to work together in a seamless way. And we want to make sure that whatever investments we're making are only going to create resilience rather than work against it.
I think of AI basically as an asset. So when you think about assets, it's those that have it, know how to use it, and can spend it. And so when we think about AI, and you're already starting to see this with people in cities, those that are what we call AI rich and those that are AI poor. So I would love, and this is something that I think Anthony and I and Ellen are constantly thinking about, how can we actually decrease that gap between those that are AI rich and those that are AI poor, and actually leapfrog to a different state when it comes to these types of tech assets that are still a major problem for us as a society.
Well said, both of you. All right, I hope students, this is your challenge. You need to rise. And I'm afraid that is all the time that we have. I want to really thank you, Anthony. We're so sorry you're not here in person, but
Same.
it was great to do the Zoom. And Debra, as always, fabulous. Thank you to all of our attendees. This closes out season 7. You have been listening to episode 44 of Redesigning Cities, the Speedwell Foundation Talks at Georgia Tech. A video and podcast of this event will be posted to the Redesigning Cities website very soon.